If you can't even afford your own rent, how do you expect to survive as a chef? That was the last thing Kayla's mother said to her before she hung up the phone, and before Kayla decided she'd never ask her family for anything again. That same night, Kayla cried herself to sleep in the back of her rusted Honda parked behind the restaurant where she washed dishes. No one in her family knew she was homeless. No one cared. But 10 years later, when her father's 60th birthday rolled around, they unknowingly booked a celebration dinner at the very restaurant she now owned because it was classy enough for them. That night, everything changed. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, stay with me. Like, comment, and subscribe because this story, it's not just about food, it's about reclaiming worth. Kayla was always the odd one out in her family. While her older brother followed in their parents' footsteps, acing law school, joining the family firm, and earning praise at every dinner table, Kayla dreamed of flavor spices and late-night shifts in kitchens that smelled like garlic and butter. Her parents ran a small but successful law practice in Colorado Springs. Respectability was their language. Kayla's love for cooking. To them, it was a cute phase she'd grow out of. But when she dropped out of pre-law after her first semester and took a job as a line cook instead, they stopped calling her daughter. They called her a disappointment. Still, Kayla pressed on. She started at the bottom, burnt hands, 14-hour shifts. No health insurance, no days off. She was 21 and alone, living paycheck to paycheck. To her family, she was just a waitress. But behind the scenes, Kayla was building something they couldn't even imagine. And that foundation, it would soon shake their world in the most unexpected way. Kayla always felt like a guest in her own family. Even as a child, she noticed the way her parents' eyes sparkled only when her brother Jason entered the room. At age 10, he was winning science fairs. At 12, he was attending mock trial competitions with their dad. Meanwhile, Kayla burned a pot of rice and nearly set off the smoke alarm trying to make dinner. Her mother's response, a sarcastic laugh. "You can't even make minute rice, and you think you'll be a chef one day." That hurt never quite left her. Every achievement of Kayla's, no matter how small or big, was met with a sigh, a brush-off, or worse, a reminder that she could always go back to school. Even after she got accepted to a culinary school in San Francisco, her father said, "That's not real college, sweetheart. That's just cooking camp." She went anyway, paid for it herself with scholarships, tips, and side jobs like delivering groceries and babysitting kids who had more stable homes than she ever knew. But it wasn't the lack of money that stung the most. It was the absence of belief. Her family never came to visit, not even once. No phone calls on her birthday. No congratulations when she graduated top of her class. She'd send photos of her new kitchen gigs only to get a thumbs-up emoji or silence. When she landed her first real restaurant job at 24 as a line cook in a rustic Italian spot in downtown Denver, she was thrilled. She worked under Chef Salvatore, an old-school Sicilian who believed in two things, discipline and passion. "You don't cook for compliments," he told her. "You cook to tell the truth." Kayla took that seriously. She was the first to arrive, the last to leave, and the only one who never complained when stuck on dish duty during brunch rush. But her family still didn't care. One Christmas, when she came home for dinner after working a 16-hour double shift, she brought handmade pastries and a bottle of imported olive oil as a gift. Her mother didn't even open it. "You smell like grease. Couldn't you have changed before coming here?" Later that night, Jason pulled her aside and said, "You know, Mom and Dad think you're wasting your life." Kayla smiled, but her heart sank. She knew he wasn't saying it to be cruel, he was simply passing along the truth as their family saw it. In their eyes, she was failing, and in some ways, she was. By 26, she was sleeping on a friend's couch, juggling 3 part-time kitchen jobs and still struggling to pay rent. There were nights when all she had for dinner was leftover bread and a staff meal she'd squirrel away in her backpack. She applied for better positions, but was turned down repeatedly. Not enough experience, too quiet, doesn't fit the vibe. Still, she kept going. One winter, after a brutal kitchen injury where she burned the entire back of her hand, She called her mom from the ER just to hear a familiar voice. Her mother answered. Kayla sobbed, told her everything, how she was broke, exhausted, and scared, that her hand might not heal right. Her mom's response. Well, honey, that's what happens when you chase silly dreams instead of real careers. That was the call that broke her. From that day on, Kayla stopped hoping for their approval. She stopped inviting them to milestones. When she was promoted to sous chef at age 28, she didn't tell them. When she began quietly investing in a startup food truck that later expanded into a pop-up dining concept in California, she didn't send photos. She learned how to separate love from validation. And with that freedom came progress. The food truck took off, then the pop-up became a full restaurant, then a second one. By 30, she was part owner in a small but growing chain known for fresh, daring menus. Her culinary voice, once mocked, was now a brand. Still not a single word from her family. They had no idea who she was becoming. And the irony, they didn't even recognize her name when they chose Ember and Oak for her father's birthday party. They just heard it was trendy upscale and chef-driven. They had no idea the restaurant bore the soul of the daughter they'd once ignored. No idea that the roasted beets with smoked lavender glaze were inspired by her first failed dish at culinary school. No clue that the kitchen tile design came from a sketch she made at age 15, the same one her mother tossed in the trash. They were about to walk into a celebration they thought was theirs. But the moment they stepped inside, the real story would begin. It started with a single email. The subject line read, "Private event booking, 60th birthday dinner." The client wanted to rent out the private dining room of Ember and Oak on a Saturday night, full prix-fixe menu, custom floral arrangements, a vintage wine pairing, even a personalized dessert course. No expense spared. At first, Kayla didn't think twice. Ember and Oak was gaining traction fast in Denver's upscale dining scene, and private bookings had become routine. She scrolled down to check the client name. Marilyn Bennett. Her mother. Kayla stared at the screen. She thought it must have been a joke. But there it was, plain as day, Marilyn Bennett organizing a birthday dinner for her husband, her father. The request had come through the restaurant's website. There was no way her mother realized who now owned the place, because why would she? In her mind, Kayla was still just a waitress. That label had stayed with her like a scar, something invisible to others, but always present, always raw. She clicked accept without hesitation. Over the next few days, Kayla coordinated everything personally. She assigned her most trusted event coordinator to the booking, but handled every detail behind the scenes, the layout, the lighting, the wine list. She curated the menu herself, deliberately designing it around her father's favorite flavors: aged ribeye, truffle risotto, blackberry creme brulee. Not to impress him, not to earn their approval, but to make a statement. The staff didn't know the backstory. To them, it was just another high-profile booking. But when Kayla pulled her head chef aside and said, "I want every plate to be perfect that night. I don't care what it costs," he raised an eyebrow. "Big-time food critic coming." She just smiled. Something like that. When the night finally arrived, Kayla didn't dress like a chef. She wore a sleek black jumpsuit, hair pulled back, minimal makeup. Not because she wanted to look fancy, but because she wanted to feel untouchable. She arrived early, walking through the restaurant like she owned it, because she did. Every wall, every knife in the kitchen, every candle flickering in the private room, they were hers. She had bled for them. At 6:45 p.m., a black SUV pulled up to the curb. Kayla saw her mother step out first, still wearing her pearls and that pinched look of superiority. Her brother Jason followed, holding the door for their father. Kayla stayed by the host stand as they approached. "Good evening," the hostess greeted them cheerfully. "Party of 12 for the Bennett celebration." "Yes," Marilyn said. "We have a reservation under my name." "Perfect. Right this way. Our private room is all ready for you. Marilyn glanced around the room, her eyes scanning the space. Then she spotted Kayla. She froze. There was a flicker of confusion. Then recognition. Then something darker. Kayla. Her voice was sharp quiet. What are you doing here? Before Kayla could answer, the restaurant manager appeared beside her. Chef Kayla, he said warmly. The team is ready for final checks. Do you want to walk through the wine pairings before guests are seated? It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Jason blinked. Her father's eyes widened. Marilyn's jaw tightened. The manager continued oblivious. We've decanted the Bordeaux and your pastry team's ready for the tableside brulee finish. Everything's on schedule. Then turning to the family. And thank you for choosing Ember and Oak. You're in excellent hands tonight. Silence. Kayla looked her mother directly in the eyes. I'm the executive chef and owner, she said, calm and clear. Welcome to my restaurant. Her mother's face went pale. Jason looked stunned. Her father? He almost smiled, but not quite. Marilyn recovered quickly, grabbing her husband's arm. Let's just get to the table, she muttered. Dinner went on awkwardly at first. Kayla didn't stay in the room, but she watched everything through the one-way glass window built into the kitchen wall. The guests laughed. Toasted. The food was flawless. Her father looked genuinely touched by the meal. But every time Marilyn glanced at a server, her expression soured. She had to sit through an entire night in a space owned by the daughter she once dismissed as a failure. And then came the final course. Kayla had instructed the team to bring out the desserts herself. She rolled the cart into the room like royalty. On it were 12 brulees, each topped with fresh blackberries and gold leaf. The room quieted. To Mr. Bennett, she said, meeting her father's eyes. Happy birthday. I hope you've enjoyed your evening. This final course is from a recipe I developed during my time at Astor in San Francisco. It won our team a James Beard nomination. There were gasps around the table. Even her brother looked impressed. Kayla walked over to her father and set the dessert down with care. Then, for the first time in years, he spoke to her directly. This is yours, he asked. All of it, she said. Every plate, every fork, every wall. There was a pause. I didn't know, he murmured. I know, Kayla replied. You never asked. The weight of that hung in the air as Kayla turned and left the room. Back in the kitchen, she exhaled. Her hands were shaking, not from nerves, but from release. Years of pain, condescension, and being invisible finally flipped in a single night. She didn't need applause. She didn't need a hug. She just needed the truth to stand on its own. And for the first time, it did. But what came after the quiet conversation with her father, the confrontation with her mother, would test Kayla's strength in ways even success never had. Kayla didn't expect an apology that night, but a part of her, maybe the youngest part, still hoping for her mother's love, had imagined that dinner might change something. That maybe, just maybe, they'd walk out of Ember and Oak with new eyes. That her mother would stop seeing her as a disgrace, and instead see the woman who built something extraordinary. But old habits die hard. The next day, a bouquet of lilies was delivered to her office. The card read, "Dinner was lovely. We're glad you found your way. Let's talk about incorporating your skills into the family business. Love. Mom." Kayla stared at the card for a full minute before dropping it in the trash. Her phone buzzed not long after. Jason, you really impressed Dad last night. He's thinking maybe you could help with the firm's hospitality clients' menus for events, that kind of thing. We could use the Bennett name in both fields. It's a smart move. A smart move. Not a word about her owning a growing restaurant empire. Not a word about her own identity. Just another attempt to pull her back into the family mold, this time in an apron instead of a suit. "I'm not your garnish," she said before hanging up. But what cut deepest wasn't Jason's cluelessness. It came later that week when she visited her father at his home office. He was alone, the house quiet. He looked older than she remembered, slower, a little softer. When she stepped in, he looked up with tired eyes. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "That dinner, it was the best I've had. And not just the food." Kayla sat across from him. She waited. "I didn't know you were capable of all that." "I think I was wrong to write you off." She wanted those words to mean something. But then he continued. "Your mother's not ready to admit it yet. She sees things differently. Always has. But we're family, Kayla. Maybe it's time we work together. Find a way to bring you back in." There it was again. Bring you back in. As if her life was some deviation from a path they had paved, and the only validation she could ever receive would come through their terms. "I'm not lost," she said. "I'm not trying to find my way back. I built something. You came into my house. And still, all you can say is, maybe I can belong again." Her father blinked. "I'm not asking for control," he said gently. "Just don't let pride get in the way of opportunity." Pride. That word echoed inside her like an insult. She stood up. "No," she said. "Pride is what got me through the nights I couldn't afford to eat. Pride is what made me keep cooking when I burned through my savings. You don't get to reframe that as arrogance just because I'm finally out of your shadow." Her voice cracked just once, but she didn't back down. And he didn't stop her from leaving. But it was Marilyn's next move that scorched the final bridge. 2 weeks later, Kayla heard through a supplier that her mother had tried to buy out Ember and Oak's lease. She called the property owner and confirmed it. Marilyn Bennett, under a shell company, had offered a substantial sum to take over the space once Kayla's contract was up, an opportunity to bring in a more classic clientele according to the pitch. It was a knife to the chest, not just because it was manipulative, but because it meant her mother wasn't just dismissive, she was actively trying to erase her. Kayla drove to her parents' home that night, hands shaking, mind buzzing. She didn't call ahead. When her mother answered the door, Kayla didn't wait for an invitation. "You tried to buy out my restaurant," she said. Marilyn didn't deny it. "I did what I thought was best. That place, while impressive, isn't stable. And you're too talented to waste it on a trendy phase. We can give you real longevity, structure, legacy. You're a Bennett." "I'm not a Bennett," Kayla snapped. "Not in the way you mean it. I don't want your legacy. I built my own." Marilyn's face hardened. "You think you're better than us now?" Kayla's voice was steel. "No, I know I'm not yours to shape anymore, and I never was." Her mother's silence was thunderous. Kayla continued. "I'm not your project. I'm not your cautionary tale. And I am certainly not your fallback plan when Jason runs the firm into the ground." The words landed like blows, but Kayla didn't care. "I came here tonight not to argue," she said. "I came to say this: do not interfere with my life again. You are not welcome in my restaurant. And if you want to be in mine, from this moment on, it will be on my terms." Her mother tried to say something, but Kayla was already halfway down the porch steps. The air outside felt different. Sharper. Cleaner. She had tried over and over to earn love by shrinking herself. Now she wasn't shrinking anymore. And it wasn't just about revenge. It was about clarity, about freedom, about finally being enough on her own. But as the weight lifted, Kayla knew the hardest part was still ahead, choosing how to rebuild and whether forgiveness was even part of the foundation. For days after confronting her mother, Kayla didn't speak to anyone in her family. Not Jason, not even her father. She silenced their calls and buried herself in the rhythm of the kitchen, the one place where silence wasn't empty, but full. Each morning, she opened Ember and Oak with a new intensity. She wasn't just cooking, she was reclaiming. But when the rush of confrontation faded, something quieter crept in doubt. Had she gone too far? Had she cut too deep? Was walking away the only way to heal? That's when she did something she'd put off for years. She booked an appointment with a therapist. It wasn't about fixing what her family broke. It was about understanding why it still hurt. Her therapist, a woman named Janine, didn't say much at first. She simply listened as Kayla unloaded 3 decades of rejection guilt and masked ambition. And then Janine said something that struck a nerve. "You're not grieving your family," she said. "You're grieving the version of them you always wished existed." That was it. Kayla wasn't mourning their absence. She was mourning the hope that they'd someday see her clearly. One evening, after a particularly long session, she stayed late at the restaurant. Only a few lights were on. The kitchen was spotless. The dining room still smelled of rosemary and charred citrus. As she sipped her tea in the empty space, her sous chef Daniela poked her head in. "You okay, boss?" Kayla nodded. "Just thinking." Daniela stepped in, holding a stack of invoices. She paused, then said, "You know, most people would have turned bitter by now. After everything you told me about your family. But you turned it into a business, into a home for people like us. That's something, Kayla." Kayla smiled softly. "I used to think the point was to prove them wrong. But now I just want to prove myself right." Daniela grinned. "Well, you're doing that. Every day." Those words sat with her through the weekend. By Monday, Kayla made her decision. She met with her legal team and finalized a trust to create a culinary scholarship for young women who came from unsupportive families, girls like her who had a dream no one believed in. It wasn't about charity. It was about legacy, her legacy. She named the fund after her grandmother, Maeve, her father's mother, who'd once slipped her $20 and said, "Don't ever stop cooking, baby, even if no one else gets it." That small act of kindness so long ago was the first true validation Kayla had ever felt. And now she was passing it on. The next step was personal. She texted her father. "I hope you're well. I'm building something I'm proud of, and it's not up for negotiation. I'm open to seeing you if you're willing to meet me where I am not where you wish I was, but I won't return to who I had to be to earn your love." He didn't reply right away. But when he did, it was short. "I hear you. And I'll come to you." That was enough. For now. As for her mother, Kayla made peace with silence. Some people never change, and some walls don't need to be climbed. They need to be walked away from. 1 week later, during a press interview for a local Denver magazine, the journalist asked her, "Would you say you've finally gotten your revenge?" Kayla smiled. "No, I didn't need revenge. I needed clarity. And I've never seen myself more clearly than I do now. Because this wasn't about proving she mattered. It was about living like she mattered, loudly, fully, unapologetically. And soon her clarity would come with consequences no one, especially not her family, ever saw coming. 2 weeks after the scholarship fund launched, Ember and Oak hosted a private dinner for 10 rising female chefs, many of them first-generation immigrants, community college grads, or high school dropouts with fire in their eyes. Kayla stood before them, her voice steady as she toasted to the ones who were told they'd never be enough. "You are already more than they could handle." That night, the Denver Gazette ran a full feature on her story. From server to chef owner, how Kayla Monroe built a culinary empire from scratch. It trended for 3 days. Jason, her brother, showed up at the restaurant unannounced the following week holding a proposal. A family-backed expansion, he said. Let's open a second Ember and Oak in Chicago. We'll handle the legal and investments, you just run the show. Kayla didn't even look at the papers. She simply asked, "Would you have said that if you didn't read the article?" Jason blinked, hesitating. Then she leaned in, quiet but sharp. This kitchen was built by calluses and tears, not boardrooms and apologies that come too late. She walked away. He never came back. Her mother. Well, she tried to book a table under a fake name. When the reservation manager flagged it, Kayla personally called the number. "Mom," she said, calm and clear. "You're welcome here anytime as a guest of the woman you disowned, not as a mother trying to pretend history didn't happen." There was silence on the other end. Then the call ended, but the message was set. No more pretending, no more begging to be seen. Just boundaries and respect. Kayla didn't burn bridges. She built walls where they were needed and doors for those who earned their way back. And the world, it finally saw her not as just a waitress, but as a woman who turned dismissal into dominance. But beyond the success and the applause came the truest measure of healing, the one thing Kayla never expected to feel again. One quiet morning, Kayla sat alone on the rooftop of Ember and Oak, a mug of coffee in hand, watching the sun creep over the Denver skyline. There were no customers, no cameras, no expectations, just warmth, silence, and space. For the first time in her adult life, she felt something she couldn't quite name at first. It wasn't pride. It wasn't even peace. It was freedom. Freedom from the need to prove herself. Freedom from the weight of someone else's version of success. Freedom to draw her own lines and walk away from anyone who crossed them. She had learned that healing isn't about changing the people who hurt you. It's about no longer needing their approval to thrive. Her story wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming her voice, her dream, and her worth. And that's what she wanted for every girl who'd ever been told, "You're not enough." You are enough. You are always enough. And no title, daughter, sister, chef, defines your worth more than the way you carry yourself. If Kayla's story moved, you share your own below. And if you're on your own journey to reclaim your voice, don't walk alone. Subscribe, stay inspired, and tell your truth.